bangs his war drum. Some Americans think we should explore other options. So is protesting for peace unpatriotic? Tim Robbins, Susan Sarandon, and a live audience. Donahue starts right now.
Good evening and welcome to Donahue. Live from New York City. Where else do you get this kind of enthusiasm? Last week, many Hollywood stars stepped out to protest the possibility of war with Iraq. And Sean Penn has just made what he called a humanitarian visit to Baghdad. Many people were outraged by these actions. But the stars say, just because I'm against the war, don't you dare call me un-American. The anti-war movement is heating up.
Resist the war!
From Washington, D.C. to California, last week alone there were demonstrations against a possible invasion of Iraq in an estimated 37 states. And the stars have come out as well in protest, prompting some to call Hollywood un-American. Are these protests a good thing for a nation at war? Or are the protesters the real patriots?
Stop the war!
Well, we'll be joined shortly by actor Susan Sarandon and Tim Robbins, and veteran journalist Hugh Downs is here. But I want to start with Dan Flynn, author of Why the Left Hates America. And you're talking about me, Dan, and former U.S. Ambassador to Iraq, Edward Peck. I don't hate America. Why would you say such a thing like that? Because the left doesn't hate America. You're on the air. Tell us what you think about...
Well, you look at a guy like Sean Penn going over to Baghdad. I think he should stay over there, if you ask me. But you listen to a lot of these Hollywood stars, and Susan Sarandon, who's going to be joining us. I mean, she said after Thelma and Louise, the United States is a land that has raped every area of the world. If she believes that and doesn't hate America, maybe she should. Because if you think the United States has raped every land in the world, then you know, it would logically follow that you do hate America. And that is why I say these people hate America, because they say it themselves.
Yeah, but it sounds like would you tolerate any protest? You know, we have introduced ourselves militarily in Central America. We've got dead nuns and priests down there, actually murdered by the people we supported. We've been bombing Iraq for 10 years.
Would you tolerate any... This is a brazen reversal. I mean, if you followed me while I put this book together, I was physically attacked at left-wing rallies. Out at Berkeley, I was shouted...
We don't do that. Lefties don't do that.
Oh, no, they don't do that, Phil. I was shouted down at Berkeley. They had a book burning at Berkeley in my honor.
Right.
It's a brazen reversal to say that the left are the ones that are being silenced. We are criticizing people like Susan Sarandon. Right. We are criticizing the Sean Penns of the world. But it's just criticism. It's not censorship.
You've been called un-American, Ambassador Edward Peck.
Never, never.
You were never called un-American?
No, they thought I wasn't particularly smart, but they never said I was un-American. See, the essence of being an American in a democracy is to make every effort you can that the people in leadership positions get all the information they need to make a rational decision, including listening to the opinions of the people.
I agree with you so much. Let's bring on the stars now. We couldn't go to Hollywood, so we brought Hollywood here. Stepping into the center of this storm, she's got an Oscar, he's been nominated. Please welcome Susan Sarandon and Tim Robbins. Right here, beautiful. Well, look at that, you're a hit. Oh, yeah. Well, holy cow, it's about time you got out here. You have some incoming, and you're not even here. To those who would say you are unpatriotic, you would say what?
Well, these blind support for leaders isn't the domain of a democracy. It's more the domain of a communist dictatorship. The great thing about America is we can ask questions, and the leaders work for us. We elect them. They work for us.
Right.
And so they're responsible to us. We're not responsible to them. So to oppose a war is a difficult thing. It takes a lot of courage in this environment. It's certainly not being said in the media. I don't find it.
You think it's a kind of a go-along rah-rah media, do you?
Well, I think we once had a media that was a watchdog that would look after the government, series of checks and balances. And unfortunately, I'm afraid we have a lapdog now. We have a flack, a publicist for what the government wants.
Right. Susan?
Nobody's answering any of the big questions. War's a big thing, you know. I want to keep America safe. I have kids. You know, I know there's going to be thousands of people injured, killed. This is something that needs rigorous debate. Nobody's said, you know, this isn't it's not a Nintendo game. This is something that, you know, what's the plan once we get in? How many people do we commit to that area?
How long are we going to be there?
How much money do we create? How do we get there? What happens afterwards? Nobody's discussing this, and I believe that if the bulk of American people had counts, had money, had, you know, some of these details were discussed, these statistics that they're giving us about blind following would crash.
Right.
Because if you ask somebody, are you willing to send your son, the whole story changes.
Here.
Kristen King with the New York Young Republicans. My question is...
Young Republicans, well, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Welcome.
My question is, don't you think that the American people are speaking out and publicly showing that they are willing to support going to war?
61%. The president is in the 60s in terms of popularity and approval, so you do have some numbers to
Yes,
support.
sir. And we also... I'm sorry, can I please finish my statement?
Oh, I thought you asked a question.
I'm sorry, Ms. Sarandon, may I please finish my statement?
Sure, I thought that wasn't...
I'm just saying that the American public has just nominated, or just elected, their first Republican president, Senate,
That's
and
debatable.
Congress in the first time in a long time. And I'm just thinking...
That proves
I'm just saying that obviously the American people are supporting our president and the thought to go to war.
All right, you agree with her.
It's far from a mandate, too. Let's not forget that more than 50% of the people did not even show up to vote when given the choice.
Right.
So we're not talking about any kind of mandate.
The gentleman.
I just think that everyone should get behind the president because he knows a lot more than he's telling you.
But if I could just interrupt for a second, it doesn't make you wrong, and I thank you. I'm glad that my name is on a program that gives you this opportunity. You said that to Johnson during the Vietnam War. We were behind him, too. We now have 58,000 names on a black granite slab in Washington, D.C. Guys and women who will never have their own talk show, who didn't enjoy the real fruits of America because they were sent to a war where you couldn't protest, but people called you names.
And Phil, we have 3,000 names. We have 3,000 names in New York City.
Mr. Clinton, let Mr. Clinton in here.
We have 3,000 names in New York City, Washington, D.C., and in a field out in Pennsylvania.
Right.
We need to do something about it. And if you listen to Tim and Susan, we shouldn't do anything. We should not do anything militarily.
Time out. You didn't find me protesting the action in Afghanistan. I support the government's right to, as police should go, to root out these terrorists.
Go in with a warrant.
And, no, to bring these people to justice.
Okay.
I have no problem with that. I think Iraq's a different story.
Okay, I agree with you.
How is Iraq? I would also like to just ask this gentleman, because I'm really interested in what you have to say. Why do you think we shouldn't have the information that this president has who's committing our sons and daughters? Why in a democracy? See, there's an interesting quote here. It says that, you know, is no longer to put up an army more or less well-trained, but to transpose a whole nation into a mental state of unconditional military willingness and military readiness. Now, would you agree with that?
Yes, but I will tell you this.
Well, you know who said that? That was Hitler.
Well, let me tell you this. Let me tell you this. Let me tell you this right now.
But the word unconditional is where I have a problem.
Don't put the Bush administration in the same class as Hitler. Let me tell you something. The thing is, they're not ready to tell us everything they know right now, and they're just waiting.
For what?
And you have to get behind the president.
But what are they waiting for? To tell us what? There's been no tangible evidence that has linked Iraq to anything.
It's not just Iraq that you oppose. You oppose basically any war against America's enemies. You oppose the war against terrorism. After we had 3,000...
How do you say that?
Because you signed a petition called Not in Our Name that said that we were that we were casting a pall of repression over American society.
I saw your stuff on the internet. You drew a correlation between anti-war protesters and the sniper in Washington. How dare you?
This is a guy. How dare I? Because he was a guy who went around after 9/11.
Let's give him a chance to explain himself, which we'll do when we come back in just a moment.
The search for weapons of mass destruction in Iraq has yet to turn up a smoking gun. So what does the Bush White House know that makes attacking Iraq a necessity? More on peace and patriotism when Donahue returns.
I think it's going to take an enormous amount of work from both the entire global community, but from both the United States and from Iraq.
Welcome back. Anti-war protesters, are they proud patriots or just plain un-American? And just how involved should Hollywood be? Well, Congressman Barr, thank you for your patience. You've listened in on our, certainly you're not going to say anti-war protesters are unpatriotic. Please, Congressman Barr, state of Georgia,
Well,
proud patriots down there, and they want to have the freedom to protest as well. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. There's absolutely nothing wrong with divergence of views. There's nothing wrong with protesting. Let me say that right off the bat. But I think in this particular case, Phil, you can see from the comments of Ms. Sarandon, for example, that she still harbors great resentment against Mr. Bush. She's mad about the election. She doesn't like Republicans. So I think we can dismiss a lot of what she's saying.
Well, that's
What's
an
really
awful
amazing,
lot
though,
of
Phil,
conclusions there. You're drawing on Ms. Sarandon just
well,
because
I think,
she disagrees
No, the fact, you know, she displayed her true colors, I think, when one of your other guests mentioned that Mr. Bush is the president, and she said, well, that's debatable. You know, and I think that indicates where she's coming from. But I think, Phil, what the most amazing thing about a lot of these Hollywood types that are against the conflict with Iraq is their naivete. They're willing to overlook the very clear evidence of what Mr. Saddam Hussein really has done and continues to do to aid terrorists, not only in this country, but around the world.
Be a better world without these Hollywood types.
Let's see the evidence.
You've just been insulted, so go ahead.
I'd love to see the evidence.
Huh?
I'd love to see the evidence. Who's showing the evidence that he's harboring terrorists?
Well, a great deal of it is found in the United Nations inspectors themselves.
Yes. I'm sorry, I didn't hear that.
A great deal of the evidence is found in the United Nations reports, not just this most recent one, but the ones going back almost 10 years that indicate very clearly that Saddam Hussein has developed, has maintained, and still maintains weapons of mass destruction.
I don't think there's anyone arguing that Saddam Hussein is an angel. I don't think that's not the point here. The point is,
well,
are we ready to sacrifice American lives for this particular cause?
And wasn't that around
without a debate?
Yeah, Susan.
And I think that was about the time that our vice president with Halle Burton went in there to reinstate the oil wells, was after the gassing of the Kurds. You know, I mean, this guy's been a horrible
there you
person
go.
for
I
a
think
long time. We've been doing business with
Miss
him.
Sarandon's true
And why now all of a sudden, you know, what about North Korea? North Korea has admitted that they have bombs and means of mass destruction. Why suddenly are we turning now? Well, that's one of the things that's never been explained.
Ambassador Peck commenting.
There's a couple of other issues to think about, too, and that is that as far as I am aware, if you make a list of the countries in this world that see Iraq as a right now immediate serious threat, there's one. You can't even count Great Britain because they'll drop it if we do. And the people out in that region fear far more the effects of us going to war against Iraq than they fear Saddam Hussein. That's obvious.
Yes. Laurie from North Carolina, thank you for waiting.
Survival is threatened by Saddam Hussein.
Laurie?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I started an online petition and I've received over 1,000 signatures in the last 3 days of people who are commenting that they're very angry at the outrage coming from Hollywood. I believe that Hollywood celebrities are they think they're extremely cool, extremely hip, and they have so much influence, and I think they're taking advantage of that right now to further their agenda. And I don't really think it's anti-war. I think it's anti-Bush. I think it's anti-Republican, and I think it's anti-conservative.
Well,
and I think they care more about their abortion agenda and their liberal agenda.
Yes,
that's what I think. And I want to know where they were when Clinton was bombing medicine.
Hang on a minute, Lori. Dan, go ahead.
And when I spoke to some of the people, the activists that were there, they would say things like, America is the true axis of evil. If any country is a terrorist nation, it is America. You don't have to look, and you have some people clapping in the audience right now to that statement. You do not have to look very far in these rallies to find people who have a visceral hatred of this country. And yet you spoke at one. No, you have a very strange way of showing it. The United States is a country that has raped every land in the world. You said that.
You just changed my quote. You said every region before. I don't know where you got that or what context.
Well, you said it in an interview after
I'm here in person, and I'm telling you right now. I love this country.
Okay,
I love the fact that it's... No, I'm telling you right now, and it's not strange. I love this country. I'm raising my children here, and they are terrified that we will be kicked out of this country because I'm asking questions. I don't want my son to go to this war. I don't want their sons to go to this war. You have not explained to me. No one is talking to me. I love this country. I want to keep our nation safe. And I believe, just a minute, may I finish?
Sure, go ahead.
That destabilizing that area is not going to help our cause. I believe that what's going to happen in terms, if we start dropping bombs on that country again and continue to drop bombs on that country, that the hatred against America will make us more, that this is also going to make Israel less safe. Any number of things are going to happen. It's not just some rhetoric. This is a real country.
We are in New York City, and we'll be back in just a moment.
Later on Donahue, veteran newsman Hugh Downs joins the discussion to talk about why his America doesn't need a war on Iraq. More with Tim Robbins and Susan Sarandon when Donahue returns.
The Braun Synchro was...
We're back talking about Hollywood speaking out against the war. Sharon from Florida, you wanted to say. Sharon?
Yes, my family has been in this country since 16 whatever, and they have fought in every war in this country, including Vietnam and the Gulf War.
Right.
And both ridiculous wars. I have two great nephews who are ready to go in this one. This is a joke. Susan Sarandon, and they can say anything they want. They've got all the right in the world to say what they think. I agree with them 100%. And these people who are sitting up there as politicians who have no blood out there whatsoever.
Let me just this is an email from Michael. I'm 17. I'm the person the Bush administration wants to hold a rifle and go off and kill Iraqis. I would like to know why. Is that too much to ask? Incidentally, Florida, you know, to speak up for those who are criticized, I don't think anybody's challenging their right to say it. But I have to tell you, when you're called unpatriotic, it does stop you. I mean, it's very personal, and it hurts your feelings. I ought to know. Yes, you wanted to. Yes.
Dave Raines from Dallas. I'm a Republican, too, but I have to vehemently disagree with the congressman. I think you have every right in the world to express your opinion. I think as celebrities you should use that in whatever way you think is correct. However, Sean Penn and Jane Fonda,
shouldn't go over
that's
there,
crossing the line.
Right.
That's wrong.
I accept your compliments to Susan and Tim. Incidentally, they are on this program selling nothing. How about it? We got movie stars who aren't selling a movie. What is going on here?
I have to say,
what are you, crazy?
We're following in a lot of ways, because you have to understand there are thousands upon thousands of people that have nothing to do with Hollywood that are marching against this war all over this country. Right. 24 cities, as of the beginning of December, have passed resolutions against this war.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
From the Today Show to 2020 to Donahue. Next, veteran newsman Hugh Downs weighs in on the question, is it unpatriotic to be anti-war?
I feel that as Americans, we should trust George Bush because we've put him in charge as our leader, and I do believe that he surrounds himself with people that are very knowledgeable. They know things that we don't know.
Welcome back to Donahue. We're live at 30 Rockefeller Plaza in New York City tonight. Anti-war protesters taking on the government. Is there a place for them in this post-9/11 world, or are they just downright unpatriotic? I'm here joined by some very special guests. Susan Sarandon and Tim Robbins are here. Georgia Representative Bob Barr, author Dan Flynn, and former U.S. Ambassador to Iraq Edward Peck. And joining us now from Arizona to tackle this question is respected journalist, political commentator, co-anchor of ABC's 2020 for 21 years, and now author of a new book titled My America. Is there anybody more successful in this game than Hugh Downs? Right here. Hugh, you've been a journalist. You've had to be a virgin all these years, and I'm going to risk, tell us, can you share with us your personal feelings now in your retirement, semi-retirement? How do you feel about this action, proposed action against Iraq? Hugh Downs.
You know, to examine that, Phil, I think you have to look at why there is so much dissent now, as opposed. Do you remember when the Cuban Missile Crisis was on, and the then administration said it had proof that there were Russian missiles in Cuba? It had proof. It immediately shared that proof with the American people, and you didn't have the kind of dissent. And even then, they didn't go to war. Now, if the American people had evidence that there was proof, I think you would not have as much dissent, because if there was a feeling on the part of Americans that we really had a justifiable war, Americans would be behind it. I think the reason for dissent is that there's severe doubt as to whether that proof is at hand.
This gentleman wanted to say, sir.
Hi. First of all, I'd like to thank you, but
you don't have to do that.
I really, God bless Mr. Andrew and Mr.
It's
Tim
an
Robbins.
hour show. You wanted to say.
God bless you anyway.
You promised me you would be brief.
Okay. I'm from Egypt. I agree with all Arabs. Saddam Hussein is an evil guy. But what's the difference between him as an evil and at the American management they said that they're gonna nuke him?
The American management what?
They are going to say, they're gonna bomb him and nuke them.
Yeah, you
right?
say that is irresponsible, you think, to say that?
Of course not, because both of them, they are terrorists. If they are going to do this, right? Because they are claiming that he has weapon of mass destruction, right? All right? Yeah. So, and then they are going to use the same thing. And there is something else. They are blaming the terrorist. When Falwell is using the name of Jesus, which every Muslim believe in him.
Jerry Falwell.
Yeah, Jerry Falwell. He insulted
You're mad about the last show we did.
No, he insulted my prophet and 1.9 billion Muslim, all right? And he didn't even apologize. This is number one. Number two, he's using the name of Jesus also, peace be upon him, to kill innocent people in Iraq and all the far right.
Right.
Thank you.
I thank you for your brother.
I'm from Australia, and it seems to me that the debate's being done a disservice by making it a Republican versus Democratic debate. This is about right or wrong. This is about lives of the entire Western world.
Right. Which is the right side?
At the moment, we don't know which is the right side or not. It seems to me all we're asking for is every piece of information available from all of our governments so we can understand, comprehend, and do something about the issues.
Mary from Rhode Island, are you there? Hi, Mary. Go ahead.
Hi, I applaud Mr. Robbins for saying we have the right to question. What I want to ask him is how come he hasn't questioned Mr. Nader, the candidate he supported for president, for having over $7 million in investments in weapons manufacturers, big oil, including Occidental Oil, and McDonald's.
So you're mad at Ralph? You're upset with Ralph Nader?
That's the first I heard of that.
Yeah, I don't know, but that's another show, isn't it? We ought to give ourselves
time. Show.
Yes, ma'am.
You want to say?
I just want to say that I think that as an American, that it's our responsibility to police our own government. Did we not elect our government to represent us and our issues and what we feel is important? I didn't elect, first of all, I didn't elect President Bush, but enough said with that. But did we not elect President Bush to represent us and what we feel? And is it not our responsibility then to police our government, to ask them questions?
Yes, I think it is.
Look,
and I think in that case,
there's a straw man being thrown out there. No one is saying you don't have the right to question your government.
Oh, yes,
no, you're unpatriotic if you do. That's all.
No. It's when someone says, as the people who have talked to me say things like, "We are the true axis of evil." I think it's appropriate to say, look, you're someone who's acting in bad faith. You don't like this country anyways. Why should we listen to what you have to say? That happens to be the case with a lot of folks in Hollywood. No one is dying to hear what Sean Penn has to say from Baghdad. No one is dying to hear what Britney Spears has to say about the Middle East situation. Who cares? They're good actors. It doesn't necessarily mean they can...
Hugh Downs, let's let you in here. You've been patient. Go ahead, Hugh.
Yeah, I was thinking, Phil, in the matter of dissent, a citizen has not only the right, but often the duty to dissent.
Sure.
This is
I agree with that. I agree with that. You were going to say.
I was going to say, we're still trying to figure out what that first Gulf War was for, because when they were selling it to us, it was about freedom and democracy, and there was no election in Kuwait after we liberated it. So I think part of this is that we got sold a load of bunk the last time. We're not willing to go there again.
Wanda from Tennessee.
Can I just say one thing?
Susan.
How can you say that actors don't have a right to be involved when we elected a president?
They do have a right, but I have a duty.
No, but
he objects to the...
all these people that are talking about Hollywood types, Reagan, whatever kind of actor you thought he was,
John
was
Wayne.
an actor.
When you say foolish things, I'm going to speak out against it.
All right, good. We're glad you do it. Ambassador Peck, please.
All right.
Yes. Yes.
Here's a career spent advancing America's interests by getting people to talk. One of the things that we have discovered at this table is that the four of us do not think that going to Iraq with war is a good idea.
Really? All four?
All four of us. So why
not Mr. Flynn.
Yes, Mr. Flynn as well.
You don't think we should go to a war?
I support the war on terrorism. I think at this point going to war in Iraq wouldn't be the best thing to do.
Have you told the Republicans in Washington this?
I don't know if they particularly care for me saying that, but look, the bottom line is that to kind of conflate Saddam Hussein with bin Laden is kind of foolish in my book. Yes. They're evil guys, but they're not the same kind.
Congressman Barr, you wanted in here, please.
Yes, Donahue, thank you very much. One of the comments that I think Mr. Downs made is very important to discuss here, and that is the sort of simplistic view that the missile crisis was similar to this in terms of verifying the weapons. Weapons of mass destruction, that is stockpiles of VX gas, sarin gas, and so forth, are infinitely more difficult in a land the size of France, larger than France, which is the size of Iraq. Our government is doing everything it can to gather all of the evidence. There is substantial evidence already out there. But if Mr. Downs thinks that you're going to get proof positive by sending a satellite overhead, it's very different nowadays, and I think we ought to give Mr. Bush the benefit of this doubt, at least, that he and their intelligence community are doing their dead-level best to get us the proof that we need.
Mr. Downs.
Yes, I would like, if they're doing their dead-level best when they get the evidence, which they now say they have, why isn't that being shared with the American people?
Well, part of it is because of the nature of intelligence sources and methods. You wouldn't want them to endanger the lives of our agents, would you?
Well, so we have to keep it secret, because if we let it go, then we're going to lose our secret agents. You know, there's a different excuse every week, Congressman. And listen, nobody...
somebody once said, gentlemen don't read other gentlemen's mails, and that's one of the reasons why we got into World War II.
Oh, for goodness sake. For goodness sake.
What's the matter with that, Mr. Peck?
If Iraq has all this stuff stockpiled and we announce it, then they'll know they have it, right? I mean...
Yeah. Wanda from Indiana, are you there?
That's silly.
Go ahead, Wanda.
I don't think we ought to trivialize this and joke about it.
Actors and actresses think that their opinion is worth so much more than anybody else.
I don't know.
As far as I know, Susan Sarandon and that Tim whatever her boyfriend is, they're not even married.
They're not even married. Not even married. Well, there's a deal breaker right there. Yeah. Nor are Mr. Peck and Mr. Flynn, now that you mention it. You're not married, therefore, I think she's suggesting that, who do you think you are? I don't know what she's suggesting.
I totally agree with you. My opinion is not worth any more than anybody else's. And if the news starts to cover issues instead of celebrities, I'd be so happy.
Right.
If people will start to tune in just because they hear there's going to be a number of different sides covered on an issue, that would be great. The problem is you've got the media that's owned by just a few people now, and less information is getting to people.
That's true.
So in order for us to make, you know, sometimes, for instance, I've gone to marches. When we were in Washington, they said that it was the largest march since Vietnam. There was a thing this big in the Times the next day.
I know.
It was
the
not
only
a large
way
march, though. It was not the largest march since Vietnam.
According to the local police, it was the largest. I don't know.
That would be anti-war march, I think.
That was the anti-war.
Could I say something about the march?
Please, Dan.
Look, you had people at that march chanting, George Bush, you can't hide, we charge you with genocide. It was organized by a bunch of communists. Right. And yet you went there and spoke.
All right. So it's their language. They're over the top. They're excessive.
Groups. There were not one group organizing.
You guys were what they would once call useful idiots.
I'm
a
not
bunch
the
of dupes
point
that
I'm
went
making.
there.
I'm saying this woman said, "Why do I have a right to talk? I only have a right as a citizen."
Why didn't you speak out about those guys saying that George Bush is guilty of genocide? The whole crowd was chanting, "We charge you."
Thousands of people.
But you can say, "Shame on you! Shame on you for throwing around a word like genocide so loosely."
Shame on you for putting those people's words in our mouths.
You were there. You could have spoken out against it, but you were silent.
And we'll be back in just a moment.
Tomorrow on Donahue. Is the highway to heaven only open to Christians? Some say only faith in Jesus as your Savior will earn you a place beyond the pearly gates. So what about Jews, Muslims, and people of other faiths? Donahue goes inside the issue tomorrow.
Reported this impending war on Iraq. That is true. We've got Barbara McCulsey. Yes.
For the record, I protested against Clinton's bombing Iraq, too.
Okay. So, Hugh Downs, may I ask you, sir, as you look over your shoulder, young man, at your own career, was it always like this in media? I mean, we are heavy breathing here, and not a few people have stood in this very audience to say, this is a media war. You're trumping this war. You're causing all the heavy breathing. Hugh.
There are changes, and of course blaming the messenger with the message and so forth is in there. But I think the big change in the media, at least in news coverage over the last decade, has been that people who own the networks and the cables things now are pretty bottom line in their thinking. And this results in budget cuts where you have major networks have cut a lot of the bureaus overseas. Right. It's harder for the people on the air to get the news to the people. But I think by and large they do a good job. But it's a different atmosphere because once networks really wanted to serve the people.
Yes.
And I question whether that's happening now.
We have some citizenry here that wants to speak. Yes.
Hi.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that, I mean, the question here is whether or not this war is patriotic.
Yeah.
But whether or not it's patriotic, it's still wrong, okay? And right now, I'm standing here, right here, this man right here, Mr. Flynn, right? Dan Flynn, he said that, you know, the 3,000 people have, you know, we saw 3,000 people die on September 11th in, right by the World Trade Center in Pennsylvania and D.C.
Right.
I go to school 4 blocks from the World Trade Center, sir. And I'm saying that I saw that happen, and I don't want that to happen to right now with 5,000 children die in Iraq every month from our sanctions.
No, from Saddam Hussein.
I don't want any more of those children to die, just like the people died at the World Trade Center.
Your point is on the record. Anybody want to speak to it here? Mr. Peck,
these are the same people that were against the war on terrorism. It doesn't make you anti-American to be against this war or any war. It just so happens that, and I'm sad to say this, that most of the people who are vocally against this war in the demonstrations do hate this country.
Yes. Oh, come on.
Yes.
Danny, babe. No. Now you have stepped across the line. Now you got to be a little embarrassed yourself.
When I hear people say that the United States of America
let the gap
is
speak here.
Or we are a terrorist nation, we should point out that those people hate this country.
You're on the record. Yes.
Before you said that Ms. Sarandon is unpatriotic and doesn't love her country, I'm not sure if you're aware, but on and after September 11th, she stood at Ground Zero handing out rags and first aid kits and anything else that you want to add.
Good for her. On and after September 11th, that was in the United States Marine Corps Reserve, so, you know, that's great. They had a big party at Madison Square Garden.
That was your job. She didn't have any job there. How much more American can you get?
There.
Mr. Flynn, if you were in the Marine Corps, I guess you know that this country is about brutal dictatorship and brutalizing the whole world. You know, I don't think the question here is whether or not we have to be loyal to warmongers, or we can be loyal to the people of the world.
All right, we thank you. Mr. Peck, sir, only seconds.
Here's something to think about. Our nation
15 seconds.
Oh, sir?
Go. 10 seconds.
Our nation pushing everybody who has problems in the world and borders over which they fight to talk hasn't spoken to Iraq in 12 years on any subject, at any level, anywhere.
Back in just a moment.
Wednesday on Donahue, do men and women compete on a level field, or do women have an unfair advantage in society? Donahue goes inside the equality of the sexes Wednesday. More on pacifism and patriotism when Donahue returns.
Me, un-American, I protested the war in Iraq back in October in Washington. I don't consider that an un-American activity at all. It's quintessentially American.
About war protesters, are they patriotic or un-American? That's the topic tonight. Yes, ma'am.
If celebrities are going to debate the war in Iraq for us, I want a fair fight. I want the conservative celebrities of the world, because I know they're out there. The Bruce Willises of the world, the Arnold Schwarzeneggers.
Right.
I want them up here.
Right.
And let's have a real fair fight here.
Yes. Who's out? I don't even know who I'm talking about. May I ask our panel, does it make any difference to you that Sean Penn went to Baghdad? Is foreign soil an issue, and does that make you less of an American? I ask the panel.
No. It makes no difference whatsoever. We're not yet at war with Iraq, although we've been bombing them for 12 years.
Well, they want to make him Jane Fonda, boy. The spin is on.
You see, but why doesn't he stay there and try to act and try to speak out against their government like he does here and see what happens?
What are we afraid of? That he might come back and say, "Hey, wait, they have amusement parks there. Do you realize that?"
Congressman Barr, you wanted in here.
I think there is very clearly a distinction, Phil, between simply doing what Ms. Sarandon and Mr. Robbins are doing, which is entirely legitimate, and that is engaging in political discourse here, as opposed to what Sean Penn is doing, which is very similar to what Hanoi Jane Fonda did a generation ago, and that is going over to our enemy's backyard and giving them aid and
Go to the wall for Sean Penn. I know him. I trust him. He's a good-hearted man. I just finished a movie with him. He's a good man. I'll fight to defend him to the end.
The other thing is, you know, I went to Nicaragua in '84 when it was unpopular because of what was going on there, and I wanted to see for myself, because when you talk about destabilizing a government, for instance, in the case of Nicaragua, there are no faces on that. That's a concept. And when you go, if you're not getting information and something's being done in your name, then you can go and get whatever facts you need.
He's going to see what Saddam wants him to see. He's not getting any new information.
Well, fine, then he'll tell us that when he comes back.
There's a bigger difference,
What is
too. When Jane Fonda went to Hanoi, Americans were being killed in that war.
That's right.
Now it's only Iraqis who are being killed. There are no Americans involved in that.
Right.
And having him go there at this stage is certainly not in any way whatsoever similar to the Vietnam War.
We have a call from Texas. Hello?
Yes.
Linda, go ahead.
I'd just like to say I think the ones of us, both stars and whatever, who speak out perhaps are more patriotic because we are willing to speak out and take the brunt or the consequences of those who think we're wrong.
Well, we thank you for your call. You speak for me. I think dissent should be alive and well and never more robust than when we send our young men and women to war. That's when we need dissent the most. And I have to tell you, having been called unpatriotic, it is no picnic. You don't want to be. I found myself, what do you mean? And then I got mad at myself. What am I doing? Trying to prove my Stop that. You can't look into a man's soul. Yes, sir, you wanted to say. Please, briefly.
To paraphrase Thomas Jefferson, I think we have to remember that patriotism is not a frenzied burst of emotion, but a long dedication to the principles of our Constitution.
Right.
Let these people speak.
And I'd like to paraphrase Samuel Johnson, who said patriotism is the last refuge of scoundrels. So beware patriotism.
Do you think that there are people that are unpatriotic?
Do I think there are people that are
Americans
unpatriotic?
that hate their own country? You won't even admit that.
Well, I'm sure there are, but I don't think it's about language. I don't think it's about dissent. I certainly don't. Look, I'm proud to live in a country that allows a person to stand up and say no.
Me too.
I regret we are out of time. This is Chris Matthews and Hardball right here.